Appreciate it very much. Larry leading some songs I think are newer, certainly new to me, but appreciate Larry doing that in fine fashion, and for those of us that are assembled, singing out together tonight. As you can see on the screen, as I had indicated this morning, if you were with us, tonight is going to be lesson 1 of 2 lessons. And the question is, are people demon-possessed today? And so an inquiry had been made about this subject matter, and maybe it wasn't so much as are people demon-possessed today, but that's kind of the approach we're going to take. But maybe more so, where in the Bible does it say that? Or how do I know that? And so we'll cover those bases by answering the question, are people demon-possessed today? There's a workbook that a lot of my lesson, a lot of the things as far as the points that are going to be made have been adapted from this workbook. It's a book that I've got in my library. You may have seen it before or have it, maybe not. But if you don't and you'd like to do some personal study, it's called Angels and Other Created Spiritual Beings. All that I know about demons and angels is whatever God has revealed about the subject. But I would recommend this book. It's written by Michael Hardin. There is a connection. Most of us know Jason. This would be Jason's uncle. And so in this workbook, the subject deals with angels and the devil and demons. And there is one lesson dedicated to the subject of demon possession. So if you had interest and for further study, in this 2-lesson series, I'm probably not going to answer maybe every question you have or might have or could come up with. And so maybe if you've got a question that is not answered in this short study of demon possession, I'd be glad to entertain that question for you. But if you were to go and search for answers, this volume just might be an aid, a study aid to you. And so we're going to be looking at or answering the question, are people demon-possessed today? In short, the answer is no. People are not demon-possessed today. That is, as we read in the New Testament. For example, in Mark chapter 1 and verse 39, the narrative there says, and he, that's Jesus, was preaching in their synagogues throughout all Galilee and casting out demons. And so it quickly, in the gospel and Mark's account in Mark chapter 1, we are quickly introduced to the idea of demon possession and Jesus casting out demons. Or in Luke chapter 6 and verse 17, the narrative says, and a great multitude of people who came to hear him, that him being Jesus, and be healed of their diseases, as well as those who were tormented with unclean spirits, they were healed. Again, we can very clearly see in the gospel narrative about unclean spirits and Jesus casting them out. Or in Mark chapter 5 and in verse number 1, there the narrative says, then they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes, and when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. And so demon possession, evil spirits are certainly a subject that is introduced to us in the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Our study in answering this question tonight, what we're going to do is, it's kind of a 3-point sermon. We're going to first look at the 3 positions that are held. There are maybe more positions, but the 3 predominant positions that are held today by men regarding demon possession. The second thing we'll do tonight is look at the Old Testament and demon possession, and then we'll look at the New Testament and demon possession. And so we're going to begin tonight by looking at, first of all, the 3 major positions concerning demon possession. Number 1, some people believe demon possession was nothing more than some kind of illness that could be physical, it could be mental, or it could be emotional. So when someone reads the Bible and they read about evil spirits or demon possessions, as we've noted from the books of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they would view those narratives of those references as people just having some kind of physical disability or physical ailment, maybe a mental ailment or maybe an emotional ailment. However, this position would change or alter the New Testament text greatly. If I took this position relative to demon possession, it would change the biblical narrative. Notice in Mark chapter 139 again, it says that Jesus came casting out demons. If demons was nothing more than physical, mental, or emotional issues, it would change the narrative completely. It would change the text in Luke chapter 6 and verse 18, right? Jesus came healing those who were tormented with unclean spirits. Or in Matthew chapter 4 and verse 24, Jesus came healing the demon-possessed. You could cite any number of instances in the New Testament, certainly in the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, in which we read about somebody being demon-possessed or somebody having evil spirits. And if their demon or evil spirit was nothing more than some physical, mental, or emotional ailment, it would greatly alter or change the narrative of the New Testament text. A second major position is that some believe that demon possession was reality in New Testament times and is still happening today. Now, such individuals assume that every wicked, unusual, or unexplainable act is the work of some demon or evil spirit. So somebody might look at a murderer. Somebody might look at a serial killer and literally think that those individuals are demon-possessed. Now, it's safe to say that those people have a heart issue, right? People that involve themselves in sin, no matter what sin it is, has a heart issue. And the heart not being the blood pump, but rather the Bible heart. Or you think about personal testimony or conjecture is often used to establish their case. Those who believe in demon possession was a reality in Jesus' day and suggest or believe that it's still happening today have to resort to personal testimony and or conjecture to support their argument or case. And then finally, those who hold this position believe the demons can be cast out today in the name of Jesus. You might even, if you had watched any number of various televangelists, you might have actually heard them alleging to be casting out demons in Jesus' name. You probably would have been able to find years ago, maybe even today, some televangelist, and they're on TV and somebody walks up on stage and they allege to have some kind of demon possession or evil spirit, and the televangelist knocks them upside the head and they fall down or whatever the case is, and it is alleged that the person walks off and they've been healed. The last major position, again, I'm sure if you went and searched, you would find maybe some other positions, but these three are the three major positions, and they pretty much encompass the positions that are held by men relative to demon possession. And the last one is the number 3, that is, acknowledges that demon possession was actual and real in the days of Jesus and the apostles, but it's not occurring today. And I would suggest tonight that it's position number 3 that the Bible supports. That we will find and see evidence that supports the biblical narrative acknowledges that demon possession or evil spirits resided in the bodies of men on this earth during the time of Jesus and the apostles. But that has since ceased, if you will, served its purpose and is not occurring today. Somebody might say, well, why did God allow that to happen? And we'll get into that a little bit deeper in lesson number 2. But to suffice it to say tonight that God allowed evil spirits and demons to assert their power during the time of Jesus and the apostles. Why? So that Jesus could prove or show his power over Satan and his angels. Matter of fact, one of the reasons why Jesus came as part of the Father's will was to destroy the works of Satan and his angels. And that would include demons and evil spirits. Matter of fact, it was the life, death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus the Christ that destroyed Satan's authority, power, and evil works. So, some people believe that demon possession was nothing more than some kind of illness. Could be physical, mental, or emotional. The biblical text itself is going to denounce that position. It's abundantly clear in the text, the biblical text, that there was something more taking place than just some physical, mental, or emotional problem. Number two, some people believe that demon possession was a reality in New Testament times and is still happening today. There's no evidence that demon possession is occurring or happening today as it did in the New Testament times, that is, in the days of Jesus and the apostles. Then finally, number three, some acknowledge that demon possession was actual and real in the days of Jesus and the apostles, but is not occurring today. Again, it is position number three that I genuinely believe that there is sufficient evidence from the New Testament to support it. Let's look then, number two. Our second observation tonight is going to be the Old Testament and demon possession. Very little is said. Matter of fact, very little, if anything, is said or mentioned about demon possession in the Old Testament. Matter of fact, there is actually no example in the Old Testament of demon possession. Now, if you did a search of the Spirit, there are references to the idea of somebody's spirit. It's in reference to their disposition. It's kind of like along the lines of somebody's heart being hardened. Like, remember Pharaoh, his heart was hardened? Well, his heart was hardened because he was told to do something by God, and he didn't want to obey God. And so his heart was hardened. He chose, through free will given to him, to disobey God. You might remember King Saul, right? King Saul had this evil disposition. He wasn't demon-possessed. He just had if you will, an evil spirit. Now, it wasn't an evil spirit as it was in the days of Jesus and the apostles. What did Saul want to do? Saul wanted to take the life of another man. What Saul had was a heart problem, a Bible heart problem. There are only four passages. There are four passages in the Old Testament that reference demons, and I'll share them with you tonight. Number one, Leviticus 17:7. Remember, the book of Leviticus is a book that's written to the priests and Levites, has much to say about sacrifices and serving in the priesthood. And in Leviticus 17:7, that passage reads, "They shall no more offer their sacrifices to demons, after whom they have played the harlot. This shall be a statute forever for them throughout their generations." I want you to notice the connection between them offering sacrifices and to whom they offered them. Another passage, the second of four passages, is found in Deuteronomy 32:17. The book of Deuteronomy, you might remember, is a book written by Moses to Israel. This is a book that, in essence, is preparing the heart of God's covenant people for when they enter in, they invade, conquer, and take possession of the promised land. Now, Moses is not going to go with them. So Moses is going to die before the days of Joshua, before they invade and conquer. And so kind of Moses' last act, if you will, before he dies, is to try to prepare the heart of those who are going to go into the promised land. And so later, near the end of the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 32, verse 17, Moses says that they sacrificed to demons, not to God. To gods they did not know. To new gods, new arrivals that your fathers did not fear. Again, like Leviticus 17 and verse 7, notice the connection. Notice the subject matter. The subject matter is about making sacrifices, not to God, but to some other. The third Old Testament reference in which we find demons referenced is in 2 Chronicles chapter 11 and in verse number 15. The historical setting of this reference is when the United Kingdom divides. So this is after the days of Solomon. Solomon was the last king, right? Saul, David, and Solomon. Each of those men reigned for 40 years. After the days of Solomon, at the end of the days of Solomon, the kingdom divides into two distinct nations, right? There was Israel in the north and Judah in the south. Jeroboam was the king of the north. He was the first king. And Rehoboam was the king in the south. In this chapter, if you read it, you'll read about Rehoboam. He wants to go and wage war against his brethren. He wants to go and try to basically get back that northern part of the land. He wants to try to take all of the land. And so God tells Rehoboam, don't do that. Don't go to war with your brethren. And in that same chapter, we read about the priest and those that would make sacrifice, how they actually defected from the northern kingdom. Why? Well, why is because, remember in the days of Solomon, the temple was made in Jerusalem. Jerusalem was in the southern kingdom. And so many of the priests had defected from the northern kingdom, and they had went to the southern kingdom of Judah so that they could offer sacrifices in Jerusalem at the temple. So this particular passage here is actually a reference to Jeroboam, the northern kingdom, and the kinds of practices he was going to enact in that northern kingdom. And it says, then he appointed for himself priests. Well, he had to appoint priests because many of them left for the southern kingdom. He says that he appoints himself priests for the high places, for the demons, and the calf idols which he had made. Again, I want you to give careful consideration to the use of the word demons and the connection that is made again for a third time in reference to worship and to whom or to what they had offered sacrifices. The fourth and final demon reference in the Old Testament is actually found in the Psalms. Psalms 106 is a historical narrative or a historical account of much of Israel's history. It's kind of like in the book of Acts, Stephen gave an account of Israel's history. Paul later in Acts gave another historical account. Psalm 106 is just that. It's a historical account of Israel's history. It catalogs, if you will, the ups and downs, a lot of the downs, a lot of the forsaking of Israel throughout her history. And so in Psalm 106 and 37 it says, they even sacrificed their sons and their daughters to demons. And so all four of these passages, these are not demons like those demons or evil spirits that resided in the bodies of men as in the days of Jesus and the apostles. The demons that are mentioned in each of these four passages are actually references to idolatry and the worship of pagan gods. And so obviously idolatry was something that plagued God's covenant people of the Old Testament. And so those demon references in the Old Testament were God's covenant people offering up sacrifices to pagan deities, to idols. They involved themselves in idolatry, and such practices were sinful and against God's law. And so in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, and those two passages in particular, really, it was a warning. Moses was, in Leviticus, trying to provide direction for the people. In Deuteronomy, trying to warn the people to ready their heart, to abstain from such sacrifices to idols. In 2 Chronicles, we see a king who is actively participating in idolatry. And in the Psalm, just a reference to their continual practice of idolatry. And so the Old Testament, there's very little, if anything, said about demon possession itself. That brings us then finally tonight, and we'll spend the greater part of our time now looking at the New Testament. And we'll make three observations from the New Testament. We'll talk about references to demons, we'll talk about the nature of demons, and we'll talk about demons in New Testament times and some unique observations to be made. Let's notice, first of all, New Testament references to demons. These are terms and phrases. And so there are various terms or phrases that are used in the New Testament relative to demon possession. The first one would be demons. For example, in Mark chapter 1 and verse 34, it says, then he healed many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons. Matter of fact, going back to the first observation, those three primary positions that are held, notice how the language, even in Mark chapter 1:34, makes a distinction between diseases and demon possession. It's true that Jesus healed many with various diseases. This is true. But he also cast out many with demons. That is, those who were actually demon possessed. Another term or phrase that's used in the New Testament is that of unclean spirits. In Mark chapter 1 and verse 27, it says, "Then they were all amazed, so that they questioned among themselves, saying, 'What is this? What new doctrine is this? For with what authority he commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him.'" And so demons, unclean spirits, they are references to the same. Notice another expression used or phrase, and that would be evil spirits. Such is the case in Luke chapter 7 and in verse 21. In the narrative there it says, "In that very hour he cured," Jesus, "cured many of infirmities, afflictions, and evil spirits. And to many blind he gave sight." And so we see another phrase, evil spirits. I would highlight again, notice the distinction that is made or used, how it's conveyed in the biblical narrative. He heals many infirmities, afflictions, and evil spirits. Evil spirits, demons, or unclean spirits has its own unique category. It's identified as to be something that was a real event. But then finally, there's another phrase that is devil and his angels, or your English translation might say servants. This is an example found in Matthew 25 and in verse 41. And that passage reads, "Then he will also say to those on the left hand, 'Depart from me, you cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels.'" This is the announcement that Jesus is going to give to those who do not obey, who do not surrender themselves to the authoritative voice of God, who do not follow and obey Jesus and his teachings. Notice the use of the phrase, though, talking about everlasting fire. That is, such fire is prepared for who? That is for the devil and his angels, or the devil and his servants, your English translation might read. Notice that in these references, these phrases that identify demons, evil spirits, unclean spirits, devil and his angels or servants, that these are spiritual beings and are called unclean or evil spirits because they act in direct opposition to the purpose and will of God. When you read through the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and demon possessions or evil spirits occupying men, notice that they're trying to pollute the lives of men. They're trying to pollute the hearts or spirits of men. And so a demon is a spiritual being that is recognized as one of the devil's agents. When we read passages such as this, demons, evil spirits, unclean spirits, devil and his angels, these are the devil's agents. Let's notice the nature. What are the nature then? Let's explore that for a moment together. The nature of demons. Well, we just identified that demons are spirits. In Matthew chapter 8 and verse 16, it says, "When evening had come, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed, and he cast out the spirits with a word and healed all who were sick." Notice the phrases, how they are used interchangeably. And so there were those who were demon-possessed, right? They had an evil spirit. And it says there in Matthew 8 and 16, what did Jesus do? It says that he cast out, what did he cast out? He cast out the spirits. And so the nature of demons is identified in the New Testament as spiritual beings. Demons can be numerous. We find this in Mark chapter 5 and in verse 9. "For he said to him," another occasion in which Jesus cast out an unclean spirit. Jesus says, "Come out of the man, unclean spirit." And then he asked him, "What is your name?" And he answered, saying, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Not only are there a plurality of demons, it appears based on Mark chapter 5 and Jesus' interaction with this demon-possessed man, that a person in Jesus' day could be actually possessed by more than one demon or spirit at a time. Another aspect of the nature of demons, again, all that I know about demon possession and demons is what God has revealed in his word. And so these are things relative to the nature of demons. Demons seek to enter and control the lives of men. For example, in Mark chapter 5 and in verse 2, the narrative says, "And when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one could bind him, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces, neither could anyone take him to tame him. And always night and day he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones. There's a clear picture given of the nature of demons. That is, demons in the days of Jesus and the apostles. It is clear that this demon possesses this man and controls this man's faculties. The man comes out and meets Jesus. The demon is in control of the man. The man has this strength where others have tried to bind him and unsuccessfully. Or in this case, the latter part of the verse talks about the man being in the mountains and the tombs, and he's crying out and cutting himself with stones. Another illustration of this is in Luke 11 and verse 14. And it says, and he was casting out a demon, and it was mute. So it was when the demon had gone out that the mute spoke, and the multitudes marveled. But some of them said he cast out demons by Beelzebub, the ruler of the demons. And so here's a man who's demon possessed. The demon is mute. The man is mute. He says nothing. But soon as the demon is cast out, the man begins to speak. And the multitudes marvel. It illustrates the nature of demons, that they had the power to control the individual. But another nature of demons, another aspect of that is that demons can be unclean and violent. In Matthew chapter 8 and verse 28, there we read, when he had come to the other side, to the country of the Gergesenes, there met him 2 demon-possessed men, coming out of the tombs, exceedingly violent. Your translation might use another English term, but whatever the term your English translation renders, it's an indication of the nature of the demons, indicating that they possess the ability to be violent, so that no one could pass that way. If I wanted to go this certain path or this certain direction, this man who was demon-possessed, this demon who was violent, I was not able to go. It wasn't safe for me to travel that path or to travel that way. In verse 29, it says, and suddenly they cried out, saying, what have we to do with you, Jesus? You Son of God, have you come here to torment us before the time? And now a good way off from them there was a herd of many swine feeding, so that the demons begged him, saying, if you cast us out, permit us to go away into the herd of swine. Kind of an indication of their uncleanness, certainly among the Jews. As we continue, the nature of demons. Demons recognize Jesus Christ as the Son of God. You might remember in the book of James, and James talks about, well, if you believe, you do well, but even the demons believe. Notice in Matthew 8 and 29, and suddenly they cried out, saying, what have we to do with you, Jesus, you Son of God? Even the demons believed. Even the demons had a certain level of faith or understanding of Jesus' identity. Such was conveyed in Matthew 8 and 29. Or in Mark chapter 1, verse 24, they say to Jesus, let us alone. What have we to do with you, Jesus of Nazareth? Did you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. You can appreciate then James' expression. And of course, in James chapter 1 and James chapter 2, James is talking about our faith being accompanied by obedience or action, right? Our faith being accompanied with works of faith. You believe? Great. Even the demons believed. And so we read about demons in the gospel account. Demons who acknowledge Jesus to be the Son of God. Demons who confessed that Jesus was of Nazareth, that he was or is the Holy One of God. Let's continue. Demons recognize the supreme power and authority of Christ. For example, in Mark chapter 1 and verse number 27, it says, then they were all amazed, so that they questioned among themselves, saying, what is this? What new doctrine is this? Now this is the crowd. This is the multitude that had witnessed Jesus healing a demon-possessed man. And so after Jesus heals, after he cast out the demon, the multitudes that is there, they marvel. They're like, what's going on? This is something that they're not familiar with. This is unusual. And here's what they said. That is the multitude that had witnessed Jesus casting out unclean spirits. For with authority he commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him. Think about the nature of demons. Demons recognize Jesus Christ as the Son of God. They recognize the supreme power and authority of Christ. When Jesus said, "Come out," they came out. They obeyed him. This passage, by the way, goes a long ways to refute the very first position that we proposed, that those who just think that demon possession in the Bible were just some ailment or sickness. Well, notice the use of the pronouns, like these were spirit beings. They were real. They heard Jesus speak, and they complied with the command. They obeyed his authoritative voice. Matter of fact, look at Mark chapter 5. I didn't put it on the screen. It's a little bit longer reading. But going back to Mark chapter 5, I'm going to start in verse number 6 and read through verse 13. So Mark 5 and in verse 6, a more complete reading of that text says to us, "When he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshipped him and cried out with a loud voice and said, 'What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God that you do not torment me.' For he said to him, 'Come out of the man, unclean spirit.' And then he asked him, 'What is your name?'" So again, an individual who is demon possessed, he approaches Jesus. The narrative goes on to say in verse 9, "Then he asked him, 'What is your name?' And he answered, saying, 'My name is Legion, for we are many.' Also he begged him earnestly that he would not send them out of the country. And now a large herd of swine was feeding there near the mountains. So all the demons begged him, saying, 'Send us to the swine that we may enter them.' And at once Jesus gave them permission. And then the unclean spirits went out and entered the swine, and there were about 2,000. And the herd ran violently down the steep place into the sea and drowned in the sea." Did you notice the language that's used? They petitioned Jesus, send us into this herd of swine. And it says that Jesus gave them permission. He told them to go. And so they went. And it shows the regard that they had, that they recognized the supreme power and authority of Jesus. Let me give you one more regarding the nature of demons. That is, demons were aware that their time on earth was limited. Now, we're not going to answer in its entirety tonight. Hopefully, Lord willing, next Sunday night, we're going to dig deeper into the duration of demon possession and answer more specifically, are men demon possessed today? The answer is no. And so hopefully next Sunday night, we're going to dig deeper into that explanation and answer. But to appreciate that expression or that conclusion tonight, demons were aware that their time on earth was limited. That is, their ability, their opportunity to dwell within men was limited. That is, they weren't going to have that opportunity. Demon possession was not going to be a lasting thing. And if there was one passage that would help us to appreciate that tonight, Matthew 8 and verse 29, we've read it, mentioned it tonight already, but for this observation regarding their nature, "And suddenly they cried out, saying, 'What have we to do with you, Jesus, you Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time?'" That is, before the time that they would no longer be able to inhabit the bodies and lives of men. I want to finish tonight very quickly with you. Demons in the New Testament times. These are some general observations that we can make about demon possession. Notice that they had the ability to speak and communicate. Demons had the ability to speak and communicate. Jesus actually spoke with demons and evil spirits. He even heard their replies. And so Jesus actually has an exchange, right? The evil spirits come and they speak to Jesus. Jesus speaks with them. They reply back to Jesus. Jesus actually has a dialogue with demons in his day. Demons had intelligence and understood the implications of confronting Jesus. Think about it. Think about some of the passages that we referenced tonight. That demons possessed intelligence and understood the implication of confronting Jesus. They identified, they believed some things relative to Jesus' identity. They even make pleas to him. They possess some level of knowledge and understanding, and even more so, some implications of their own discourse with Jesus. How about in Luke 8:28? It says there that when he saw Jesus, this is a demon-possessed man, when he saw Jesus, he cried out, fell down before him, and with a loud voice said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." Now, you might just read that passage and be able to read it in a few seconds, but if you go back and give some attention to it, there's some things that you might be able to notice. First of all, notice that he cries out, like, right? There's this plea that's going to be made. He falls down before Jesus. Like, these are acts with intent. And with a loud voice, right? He says, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you." The imploring continues. The begging continues. "Do not torment me." Demons experienced what? This passage illustrates that demons themselves experienced fear, anxiety. They experienced torment. And so this is some significant evidence that indicates that demons were real beings and not merely some ancient illness. Now, are men demon-possessed today? No. The answer is no. They are not demon-possessed. Demon possession does not exist as it did in the days of Jesus. Do men do evil things? Yes. Are there many among humanity who have a heart problem? Yes. Does the devil work on the hearts of men? Yes. Right? We're tempted by the devil. God doesn't tempt, the devil does. The devil's toolbox is still open today. The devil still is working on our hearts. The devil is trying to tempt us, to lure us away from God. But the means, mode, or manner through which the devil does that is the tools that John writes about, right? The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. Demon possession today, as it was in the days of Jesus and the apostles, is not one of the means, modes, or methods that is used today in the lives of men. Next Sunday night, I'm going to try to answer two specific questions. The first one is, may demons possess or afflict people today? Obviously, I've already indicated the answer is no, but, right, how can we go about proving that? How can I show that from Scripture? What evidence is there in Scripture that proves that or shows that? And so that'll be the first question we're going to be looking at and provide evidence for, in an effort that we could explain to somebody why demon possession doesn't exist today. The second question is why is there no demon possession today? It's clear there was in the days of Jesus, but why not today? And there's actually a logical, reasonable explanation as to why there is not today. Appreciate so much tonight your kind attention regarding this subject matter. As I said in the beginning, there's probably questions that folks have about the subject, and it's likely that there may be questions you have that I just won't answer. Not that I'm not trying to avoid it, but you just may have questions that I just don't touch on. And so if that's the case, feel free to inquire of those things, and I can do the best that I can, either in a lesson or a Bible study or just kind of talking about it in conversation. But if you've got a question that's not touched on relative to the subject in this lesson or next week's lesson, just jot it down, give it to me, and we'll address that. We're going to sing 284, What Will Your Answer Be? What we're going to learn, we touched on it, mentioned it a little bit tonight, but next week what we'll really see is that Jesus has power. He possesses all power in heaven, on earth. And Jesus has defeated Satan and his angels or servants. And so it's in Jesus Christ we have salvation. Victory is in Jesus. What will your answer be? The song talks about us standing in judgment, and someday we will stand before God in judgment and have to give an answer for how we lived. And so God, through His Son, Jesus Christ, has made salvation possible. Tonight, if you're not a Christian, you can become a child of God. Tonight, be baptized for the remission of your sins. Arise to walk in newness of life, to grow and to mature in the faith. And the brethren here at Barberton will hold your hand high and do everything we can to encourage you and support you and edify you in your walk with God. We'll walk together and strive to make heaven our home. And so as we sing 284, if you're here tonight in subject, won't you come together? We stand and while we sing.